This is Bob Rourke with Business Leaders Podcast, and today, instead of being my co-host, she's going to be the guest of the podcast, Catherine Wicklund. She's the Vistage Chair of Southern Colorado. She's also the CEO of Savant Leadership Solutions. Mm-hmm. Catherine, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You know, I think for a lot of folks out in the business community, they may not know what Vistage does, or they have a misconception of maybe what Vistage does. So tell us a little bit about Vistage and who you serve.
So Vistage is actually a global organization that's been around for 65 years and is the best kept secret in town. And it has currently 23,000 members globally. We're in 21 different countries. And what it provides is a peer advisory group, a private peer advisory group for business owners and key executives who are wanting to improve both personally and professionally and grow their businesses at the same time.
You know, for me, I hear private peer advisory group going, whew.
It's a tongue twister.
So in practical terms, so I'm the CEO, and I come into the first Vistage meeting. Mm-hmm. What does my private peer advisory group look like when I come into my first meeting?
So the group is comprised of business owners and key executives from non-competing industries. So you would not see anyone else from a wealth management perspective in that room. That's the first advantage.
And so if I'm a retailer, unlikely, or if I'm a small manufacturer that does auto parts, I won't see another small manufacturer doing auto parts.
Right, that's part of the secret sauce,
mm-hmm.
right? So you can get a completely objective view from around the table. We start our day typically with a speaker. Vistage actually has a speaker database of 1,000 speakers.
And they're highly vetted, are they not?
They are. 7 of the world's top speakers are Vistage speakers as well. And so we have a speaker in the morning, and then we typically start with check-ins, and then at lunch, and then the afternoon is problem solving and troubleshooting. So you bring your problems and you leave with solutions.
And then I hear repeatedly from previous Vistage guests that someone holds their feet to the fire.
Yes. So the group is also responsible for holding each other accountable in moving forward and taking action on challenges and opportunities that we've talked about, or that we maybe have talked about between meetings. And then as the Vistage chair, I meet with each of the chief executives once a month for an hour and a half and do an executive coaching session where we also talk about where are we now and where we're going. And then I hold them accountable to the solutions and the actions that they've committed to, which is what keeps the business moving forward, which is why Vistage members' businesses grow more than 2 times faster than their competitors.
You know, I want to circle back a little bit, you know, and it's not like you woke up and decided that you were going to be a Vistage chair, because you had a lengthy and highly diverse corporate career before your Vistage chair. Let's talk about what you did during that career and how you bring that forward to the Vistage members.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So I like to joke that I've been a leader since before Colorado had a hockey team. And that has been in both corporate and also nonprofit sectors. And I always say, if you can motivate people to do something without paying them money, you can motivate anybody. And that served me well when I went back to corporate and had to motivate employees who were getting paid to show up for their jobs. But I knew how to motivate a volunteer, so that served me well. My leadership background, I've led teams from 20 to 200 people. I'm also a certified coach, entrepreneur coach, and an executive coach. And I supported up to 450 employees worldwide for Quantum Corporation as one of their HR business partners. And in that role, I learned a lot about the people piece of the business, and from an HR perspective, what's within the employee log guidelines and parameters, as well as coaching executives 35 to 50 executives every year, from director level all the way up to C-suite. And when my job became more HR generalist and less organizational development, because organizational development is really my passion, I started looking around to see what else was out there. And Vistage had been pinging me saying, hey, we think you'd be a great fit. Why don't you give us a call? So I called to see what it would take to be a Vistage chair. And they are very selective about the people that they choose to be chairs. This is not an easy job. You are facilitating meetings one day a month with highly intelligent and effective CEOs who spend most of their days telling people what to do and making decisions. This is their one day off a month where I get to be in charge and they have to take the day off. And I am very skilled at that. I'm a certified facilitator, came to the table with those skills. And so between my leadership experience, my executive coaching experience, my facilitation experience, and then also I'm a certified trainer. So I do a lot of organizational development, have done a lot of organizational development and training of employees from $15 an hour all the way up again to C-suite level. And between all of those skills, Vistage, being a Vistage chair really married everything that I love doing and helped me be able to create positive change in a different way.
So it's not like this is your first rodeo.
It is not. And it's hilarious because they will try to get away with things and it will not fly.
You know, I actually was a guest not that long ago, and with the various egos in the room, every now and again the crowd would get a little raucous, and you'd reel them right back in and get back on task. So which I thought was, you know, for me, I've been to lots of meetings where they just get out of hand and nothing gets done. I'm a real fan. If I'm going to take the time, I want to get something done. And absolutely, positively, that's something that you bring to the table every time. You know, the fun part, I think, in the Vistage meeting that I was involved with is there were a number of folks that had a couple of challenges, and it was an open forum, and the folks really dropped whatever agenda they might have had, and they focused on that particular issue for that particular member, which I thought was amazing to watch the group come together to offer advice. Some of it I probably was not exactly what the person thought they wanted to hear, but nobody did it maliciously.
It's a very gentle, confrontational climate.
Yes, and you know, so I thought that was a really nice first view. The speaker that you brought in was amazing. Was a statistics guy talking about choice and choosing and confusion between choices was amazing. Hadn't seen that before, so really quite the value, and was lucky to be a guest.
Yeah.
Which
and what's funny is all of the members feel like they, and this is true worldwide. I hear Vistage members say it all the time. I get way more from Vistage than I give. And yet every single person sitting around the table is giving all the time, because exactly what you said, they drop what they came for and they really focus on helping someone else. So you're not only helping yourself, you are helping others in a way that you can't imagine.
Well, you know, that in that reciprocity world, you know, if you think says I'm really here to help the members here, and if I have a challenge or something, you know, and you keep helping in a non-judgmental way, I think that comes back. You know, it's kind of the law of the universe, I think, on the reciprocity side. Yeah. So, you know, as you look at your role from corporate to the role now that you have with the Vistage members, what would you say is the biggest difference that you notice when you're working in a smaller group versus the larger groups?
I think the camaraderie. I mean, there is a true loyalty and care between the members. I mean, we have become family, and they call on each other outside of our meetings. They meet together for lunch or happy hour or golf outside of our meetings. It becomes, these are people who know what's going on in your business, and very oftentimes they know more than the people that you work with about what's going on in your business. And it is a very sacred space, and you become very tight through those ups and downs.
the trial by fire side of the house. Yeah, absolutely, common ground. For you, when you're looking at folks that have considered Vistage, what's the most typical question you get from somebody trying to make up their mind as to whether they want to join Vistage or not?
The two biggest questions I get are really how much time is this going to take, and how much does it cost? So the time commitment for the Chief Executives Group is 1 day a month plus an hour and a half coaching session with me. That's the commitment. And for the Key Executives Group, the time commitment is just 1 day a month for the group meetings. For the cost, Chief Executives Group is just under $20,000 a year, and the Key Executives is just under $10,000 a year.
You and I talked about that before, and it struck me. And this is, so how many people worldwide are members of Vistage?
23,000.
And so, I suspect there's a pushback on pricing, like everything else on the planet. And what struck me is, let's see, we've got 23,000 highly qualified CEOs or corporate executives that have collectively gone brain dead and decided to spend 10 to 20 grand a year, and some of them for over 20 years. That seems to be a little bit unlikely. And so as I think about the cost of coaching or the cost of having a problem in your company that festers and goes on, where there may be somebody in the Vistage group, this is the solution that I used and it might work for you. How much value is offered from the collective wisdom of that crowd?
I mean, another question to ask is, when was your last bad hire, and how much did that bad hire cost you? Not 20,000, probably more like 80,000, maybe more. So if the Vistage Group, if coming to one Vistage meeting could save you from a bad hire, it's paid for your dues for the next 5 years, right?
Yeah, the return on investment and all the experience and wisdom that you have from all the years that you did, and then you start to add up the varied experiences of the members. And there's ex-military guys, former flag officers, entrepreneurs of every stripe, and you look at that and I think about the fabric, how the fabric of the group and the perspectives they bring,
right.
And I think about how many aha moments do you have to make it work,
right?
So I guess I'm somewhat puzzled by the folks that come in and get all wrapped around the axle on pricing.
Yeah.
And you think about in your company, if you're spending $1,500 for a marketing campaign that doesn't work,
$1,500 a month, right?
Yeah. I mean, or any of that. Anyways.
Yeah. So one of the things that I do talk about is there's hundreds of years of experience, so over 200 years of experience sitting around that table. You can't pay for that kind of knowledge. You can't pay for that kind of access.
Well, you think, I'll buy a book, right? I'll buy a book.
Yeah.
And I think about, says, if you read it in a book or you talk to the guy or lady that's running a company, says, no, I implemented that particular protocol in my company. This is not what to do. This is how I did it. This is how I would recommend you do it. And if you have a problem with it, call me and I'll help you.
And that's what they do.
Yeah,
I think I figured out it would cost to pay these CEOs for 1 day of their time. It would cost a certain amount of money, right? If we took just a monthly fee for 1 day of their time. If you paid for your own speaker to come in for a half day, it costs a certain amount of money. And if you paid for an executive coach on the side, it would cost a certain amount of money. And when I added it all up, it averaged out $20,000 a month. If you paid for each of those things just on your own. Vistage is the best deal in town.
We're dwelling on this a little bit, and I think, and the reason why in my mind is there's a disconnect between perception of value. And the disconnect is if you haven't been in and you haven't been there, you don't know. And the folks that have been in there and have participated with Vistage, they get it. And so if you're on the outside looking in and you haven't come, the best thing I would recommend is come as a guest. Reach out to Catherine and ask her, says, how do I do this? Let me come look. And before I go too far down the road, if they're going to reach out to you, how do they find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Catherine Wicklund, and I'm in Colorado Springs, Colorado. There are other Catherine Wicklunds. There's a Dr. Catherine Wicklund. I am not there. She's somewhere out east in Chicago, I think. But so Catherine Wicklund on LinkedIn in Colorado Springs, and then you can just email me directly, Catherine.Wicklund, and that's WICKLUND @vistagechair.com.
Well, now that we've talked about one of the things is pushing back at a time, I think is when you say spend your time, and that's exactly what you're doing. When you don't have a lot of time, you're allocating your time. And we talked about it earlier in the episode about how you manage the group to make sure that there's results in the time, and it just doesn't end up to being a social hour.
It is not a social hour.
It is
I make you work.
It is not a social hour. So, for time invested in getting mission stuff done, the time is well allocated and well used in the meetings.
Right. And on that note, you bring up a good point, Bob, because most people will say, I can't afford to take a day away from my business. And my response to that is, are you working in your business or are you working on your business? Your Vistage day is the day you work on your business. And most CEOs, especially new entrepreneurs, startups, smaller companies, they're working in their business every single day. They don't take any time to work on their business.
And I think about, and this is sort of a pet project of mine anyways, is a lot of business owners have a job. They don't have a business, in that if they're not there, their business doesn't have any value.
Yes.
And I think about coming to Vistage for a day where you're actually working on your business and creating value in your business. How do you take, and what's the first hire you want to make? How do you start to prepare your business for sale? Has somebody else in here sold a business? And the chances are somebody sold a business before. And so you start getting the insights to create value that a potential buyer at some point will pay for your business, because everyone's going to transition out of their business.
That's correct.
One way or another. And you'd rather do it in a value creation method or approach than wake up one day, have a health event, and go, I have to sell my business, and I am my business.
And oh, by the way, your health event may have been caused because you only worked in your business instead of taking one day a month to step back, take the 10,000-foot view, and work on the business.
Smarter and harder. Sometimes smarter works a little better, and getting a little help along the way.
Most times, that's right. Don't do it all by yourself.
No, not necessary.
Use the wisdom of the crowd.
Yes, ma'am. So I think about all that you've seen in your past corporate life, and all that you've seen going through your time as a Vistage chair. So if you were going to offer advice to a business owner, based on those two pieces of wisdom, is there like an overarching piece of advice you would offer?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I've learned about top leaders, so we'll say the C-suite, and sometimes it occurs at the director level, but most times it's VP C-suite, is that they can tend to be perfectionists. And so the advice that I would offer is take imperfect action. Take imperfect action, because if you wait until it's perfect, you get stuck, you get stalled, and the company is just spinning its wheels. So, and I had this example. So I had the good fortune to actually work early in my career under the man who became the CEO of Northrop Grumman Corporation, and another gentleman who became a former director of NASA. And what I learned from them is that you take the action and then pray for rain. If you're not ready, pray for rain, right?
Iterate.
And it happens, right? Yeah. But at least if you take imperfect action, you're moving forward. If you wait until it's perfect, you'll fail.
I think about, by the time you have all the facts in place and you arrive at perfection, the circumstances changed.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
The old analysis paralysis issue. And sometimes I think, we hear minimum viable product. Get it out, test, iterate. Get it out, test, iterate.
Right. And the Vistage Group is great for helping you figure that out, right? That's what one of the challenges we processed was the business owner thought she was maybe not incentivizing her sales team correctly. And so we spent time helping her figure out what could make a better impact.
Mm-hmm.
Within 2 months, their sales doubled.
I think about that, and so in order for that math to work, so let's say it's 20 grand a year in 2 months. So if your sales doubled from 20 to 40 grand, you go,
paid for your dues.
And then, but that thing keeps iterating through the year. So net present value of future revenue stream is a big number. And so I think about the ongoing challenge of perspective, and you have enormous perspective from your corporate career, and then all this interaction that you have with the Vistage CEOs. So if you were going to offer a piece of advice to a CEO that's taking the role of CEO for the first time, what advice might you offer?
I would say get into a Vistage Group as soon as you can, so that you are not having to try to figure it all out alone. These Vistage members are willing and able and ready to help you be successful. That's part of what we do, and everyone has takeaways. Everyone gets something every day that we meet.
I think the interesting part is, let's say you go in and says, I have a blue problem, whatever it is that your problem is of the day. And there may be a discussion that goes on and you go, I didn't even know I had the red problem, but I had the red problem and I now have an insight to address the red problem. And so I think some of the takeaways and ahas, when you go in with a preconceived notion, I think it's pretty easy to take and get a key takeaway from listening to the other members and their problems.
And the speakers. So that's the other thing, is I'll bring in speakers based on what I know what's going on. So I choose the speakers for our groups. I bring them in based on what I know is going on in the group. Sometimes members come in thinking, well, I don't have this problem. And then the speaker speaks and they say, oh my gosh, I have a problem that I didn't know I had, right? So it is about working smarter, not harder. It truly is. It's about using the wisdom of the crowd and letting the group do the heavy lifting.
My best analogy is, you see a lot of times on TV, you'll see the military doing an obstacle course, and there's one obstacle that's just a little taller than your reach. And so one of the other guys either gets a boost up or puts a hand down to get you over. And sometimes it doesn't need to be 100 feet. It can just be a little bit. And so I think as you guys are helping each other,
yes,
it's just that small phrase, that small encouragement, that small technique, maybe is really a gatekeeper for you.
Absolutely. It's fabulous. Or some of them have been through it before, and they'll say, here are the mistakes I made. Please don't make the same ones. Let me help you. Right?
For you, shifting out of the corporate world to the Vistage world, best allocation of time or initiative that's helped you serve your Vistage group?
So one of the requirements as a Vistage chair is that you meet with your Vistage chair peers monthly and sharpen your own saw, because you can't help them get better if you're not getting better yourself. And that's another thing I believe about leaders. If you're not getting better as a leader, how are you helping your people? Most CEOs really want to develop their people, and they think all the time about developing their people, and they think it's a sacrifice, right, for them to develop themselves, when in fact, if you're not developing yourself, are your people outgrowing you? If you're not developing yourself, what kind of model are you sharing? So I sharpen my saw as well. It's a Vistage requirement for the chairs, and then annually I go to a Vistage chair conference that is all learning and development. It is 3 full days of learning and development for me as a chair on how do I get better? How do I help my members improve? What can I do? What thought processes can I do and implement to help us all get better as a group? Last year our keynote speaker was Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great. None of my members have access to Jim Collins. I personally don't have any access to Jim Collins. And through Vistage, not only was I able to have access to Jim Collins and hearing him as a development speaker, but I also was able to take the notes and share those with my members so that we can get better as a group.
I think back to experience and the journey. So you've been through your corporate journey, and you're in the Vistage journey. So we have the Catherine and that's where she is today. What advice would the Catherine of today offer to the Catherine that was starting her Vistage journey? What advice might you offer to that Catherine of a few years ago?
Jump in with both feet. It is, the reward is priceless. It's really difficult to explain in words. It is one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had in my life. And I get exposure to amazing human beings who care deeply about each other. And I'm very passionate about our businesses in Southern Colorado being successful. I'm a third-generation native Coloradoan, and I am bullish on us being successful, and I want to be part of making that happen for Southern Colorado.
We talk about this some. As a business owner, until you've been a business owner, you don't really realize that it's not just you. It's the lives of all your employees. It's their family. It's their children. It's the education.
The community.
It's the lifestyle, the community support, and making a difference. And the business owners, I think the statistics since 2008, 2/3 of all jobs created were created by the small business owner in the country.
Yeah.
And so you think about that, and you go, well, what if we have a collective group of business owners uneducated? What's going to happen to their business and their employees and their families? And I've talked about that in transition for business owners many times, where you go, 80% of business owners will not transact when they go to sell their business at a certain price level. And you go, what happens to their employees? It's a real, so I think the value of bringing coaching of this caliber into a community really serves the community well.
Yeah, thank you. And on that note, I do have a quote on that, which I think sums it up. And that is one that I've run across several times, where let's say a VP level is going to the CEO and saying, hey, Joe Smith wants this professional development. We'll say he wants to belong to Key Executives Group at Vistage, and it's going to cost $8,000 a year. And the CEO just basically looks at Joe Smith and says, or the VP, and says, well, what's your problem with this? And the VP says, well, what if I develop him and then he leaves and goes to work for another company? And the CEO says, well, what if you develop him or what if you don't develop him and he stays?
That's that old joke. It's that if you think, if you think education is expensive, just try ignorance.
Yes.
Same thing. And I think about you as you have this collective group of Vistage members, and on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, how do you structure what you do so you make sure you communicate and transmit and do what you should be doing to help them out? What do you do?
So some of my time is spent in membership enrollment, because the more members that we have in our groups, the more value our members get. So some of my time is spent that way. I am constantly passing off tips and tricks and information to the members that I do have, as well as people that might be thinking about joining a Vistage group. And then I spend a lot of time in my one-to-ones, which is precious time to both me and the clients and the members, and then preparing for our one-day group meetings so that when they leave there, it was a day well spent and they don't even think about the money.
Getting value. So we're going to take over the local paper, and we're going to put the Catherine Wicklund Southern Colorado Vistage message on page 1 of the local paper. What would it say and why?
It would say, if you haven't checked out Vistage Southern Colorado, at least check it out, if not join. The results that we've produced just in the 2 years that my group has been together, we have one member who has doubled her annual revenue in 18 months. We have another member who saved $400,000 for his company the first year he was in the group, which paid for his dues forever. We have another member who the group helped him manage through 3 different acquisitions in the last 12 months. We solved multiple people issues because this is a safe place where you can come together with objective, great minds and say, here's what I'm dealing with. I got this employee, right? It's the whole, I have hired employees and human beings.
And the rejoinders, I've got one of those too.
Yeah, human beings shown up.
Yeah.
And so just being able to talk with a group about here's what's going on. What am I missing? What are my options? What can I do about this, right? And then also several company restructures. So they've done internal restructuring where we've helped them figure out what's the best plan going forward based on what they're facing from economic standpoint or, just business market standpoint for their particular business.
I was recently at a meeting, and they prepare women for board seats. Mm-hmm. And the speaker came in, and she said that most board members that they're looking for nowadays are folks that have handled disruption. Mm-hmm. Disruption, whether it's merger, disruption, whether it's technology, take any number of things that are going on nowadays, economic changes, interest rate changes, international competition, any of the disruptions. Mm-hmm. And so most of the business owners that have been around any length of time have seen more than one. And so, and you certainly have seen them through your career.
Yes.
And so the ability to take and train and understand. There was an interesting statistic that you shared as well. For me, in my memory, 2008 was probably one of the larger disruptions economically in recent years. Mm-hmm. And there was, the Vistage Groups really did a good job. So can you comment?
Yes. So what I learned, our Vistage Groups in Colorado are definitely very much tied together. We usually try to do at least 2 statewide events a month that are Vistage members and invitation only. And what I learned just recently is that when the 2008 economic crash occurred, all of the Vistage members in the U.S. survived over their competitors because they had their Vistage Group and their Vistage Chair and their Vistage Network to help them manage through the storm. Mm-hmm. Versus those businesses who, number one, maybe didn't expect it, and number 2, didn't have resources to help them through it. They just thought they were alone.
I think about the extreme situations in various market downturns, mm-hmm. in particular when you don't have anybody to talk to about mm-hmm. it. And by the time you do, it may well be too late. Mm-hmm. And I think there are some folks that have, maybe they've been around the track a little longer than others. Mm-hmm. And we were commenting that CEOs are optimists by nature mm-hmm. and cheerleaders by mm-hmm. nature.
Yep.
And there may be somebody else in the group says, I appreciate that, but have you stress test that thought process? Mm-hmm. What happens if the best case scenario doesn't occur? Mm-hmm. Or you bet in your company.
Yeah, and that's the other advantage of the fact that they're non-competing industries. A couple of people have said to me, well, I'm already in something like this. It's we meet once a year and we're all in the same industry. And I just want to say to them, I just want to knock on their head and say, knock, knock. They're only seeing what you see. You guys are all seeing the same things. You cannot objectively help one another because you are all in the same boat. Mm-hmm. Vistage makes sure that you are there's a sailboat, there's a Navy ship, there's a speedboat, there's a power racing boat, there's a cruise ship, right? All in the group, and they are all going to band together to make sure that you're going to navigate those waters.
Well, I think in the economic cycle, there are probably automobile people and restaurateurs and mm-hmm. manufacturing and mm-hmm. construction, and through the economic cycle, not everything moves in lockstep. Mm-hmm. And so one guy says, I'm right. starting to see more distress mm-hmm. in the restaurant. Maybe that's the first indicator. Mm-hmm. You could talk to a guy that's in the building trades, and he goes, we're starting to see less contracts, we're seeing tighter margins, we're seeing slow pay, any number of things that would suggest and there are bank members and credit union members that are in there because they have people that show up every day for work too, and they'll have a perspective on interest rates. So I think the cross-pollination, and I don't think any of these people are shy, at least not. And so they go, no, I don't.
You met them.
Yeah, I don't see that. I see this, and I think there's a real value in challenging what you think.
What you think you know.
Yeah,
right. And this is the thing: we don't know what we don't know.
And it's funny. I think for many of the business owners, you'll talk about if they go to exit their business, the first time they sell their business may be the first and only time they ever have, and where the person acquiring their business, if they're strategic, could be just one of multiples of businesses.
Right.
So when's the last time you did something really well? The first time you ever did it. And so I think within that crowd, there's we've been there, done that, been there, done that, and here's the short version of things that work.
Right.
Yeah. And I think there's extreme.
Here are the cliff notes, right? Learn from my mistakes and let me help you through this.
Oh, because no, I want you to do exactly what I did and mess this up. No. Good
luck with that.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
I'll tell you what I
had
did.
that happen. Too bad.
Yeah. It sucks to be you.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, we don't do that.
Yeah, no. So in looking at, as you go through and work with more and more Vistage members and whatnot, is there a belief or protocol or something that you put in place over the past couple of years that's really helped you impact the Vistage members?
Yeah, it is something that I think I was raised with, and she didn't really say it this way. My mom always said, buck up. Just buck up. And what that became for me was I found a quote by Barbara Fletcher that's, if you're not part of the problem, if you're not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. And that is how I work with every single one of my members. Okay, bring me a problem. That's where we are now. What are we going to do about it? And how are you going? What's attainable? What's measurable? What is going to get you to where you need to be? I am not a therapist. I am not a counselor.
But I know somebody that is.
I do know somebody that is, and those people are really good at what they do, looking to the past. I am here today. Where are you now? Are you in a hole? Okay. How are you going to get out?
Quit digging.
Let's talk about it.
Yep.
That's right.
I think about that comment, and we had a recent guest on that had a problem that the local Vistage Group didn't have a solution for. Pardon the pun. And there was a member that reached out to the international group of Vistage members. So, I think about somebody that may be saying, well, geez, do they really know everything in that small group?
You don't have to. So there are 22 different networks within Vistage that you can be a member of. So once you join, you get everything Vistage. You get access to the speakers. So if you are a business owner who has to hold an annual conference, let's say, and bring in speakers for your market, you have access to those speakers. You can hire them independently. You have access to 22 different networks that are global. For instance, the Entrepreneurs Network, the Financial Management Network, the Construction Network, the Manufacturing Network. There is a health network that is not a substitute for health insurance, but because you are a Vistage member, we have partnerships with Johns Hopkins, MD Anderson, and Mayo Clinic. If you are a Vistage member with a health issue, or someone in your family or your company has a health issue, you have instant access to those 3 top medical authorities. The health network was where the solution was found. And they were able to solve it within, I think, 2 weeks.
And I think about that just, as a resource, and as an individual business owner, I have a very specific niche problem in my industry, and no one in my industry seems to figure out how to solve my problem. And it's a resource, and you think, well, what's a connection worth? It's probably the inverse on how bad your problem is. The more you need the solution, the more valuable they may be. So, for you, you've been in the corporate arena a long time. Or you started really young.
I did.
You started really young. Yeah. Child labor laws.
Yep.
That kind of thing.
I just am a person of service. I started working when I was
a pup.
12, and then, for a law firm when I was 16.
So in looking at that, and we talk about what makes people get up in the morning? What's the motivation that keeps you going, and how do you keep being refreshed?
So I have just a natural desire to create positive change. I have kind of a mission of leaving everything better than I found it, and that includes people. And so it's that constant desire to want to create positive change and help others create positive change in their lives as well.
This little pebble in the pond gig. You just never know. You just never know. I think about that. You help a business owner, maybe one of their employees gets really trained up. Maybe they go to the next level. Maybe their kid can go to college or go somewhere they never could have gone before. You think about that and you go, will you ever know? Maybe not. Doesn't matter? No. But you did. For you, as you look at resources and stuff, is there a recent book or publication that has helped you with what you're doing or alter your perception that you'd care to share?
So I am a big book person. I have a lot of books. I have stacks and stacks of books, and I love to read. But I would not say it's a recent book. I would say it's one of the best foundational books that I would recommend to people. There are two. One is Jim Collins' Good to Great, which is incredible. If you haven't read it, I would. And start figuring out what is your corporate flywheel. If you have not figured that out, do it. And the other one is The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell. So I'm also John Maxwell certified. And John Maxwell is an amazing leader and has over 50 books and several workshops that you can take. I'm certified in his material. And that book, I have done book studies several times with several leadership teams. And by and far, if you need now to know how to be a leader, that it becomes sort of your guidebook for the job.
Well, and I think there's a misconception for some folks. I think the military model of leadership is kind of what's most recognized and probably followed. And the military's got a very distinct mechanism of training leadership. And I think some folks may be under the impression that you're born one or you're not. Misconception.
Correct.
So that's a good resource.
Yes, you can learn to be a leader. You don't have to be a natural one. I happen to be a natural one. I'm one of those people that if there's 10 people in the room and we're trying to get a project finished and people are just walking around in circles and nobody's doing anything, I'll sit back and watch, and then I will insert myself and say, okay, where are we going? What are our desired results? What time are we going to end this, right?
Let's get something done. GSD.
That's right.
Yes.
Get it done.
Catherine, we've chatted for quite some time, and and for the folks out there, this is kind of a pet project of mine in working with the Vistage Group. I'm a fan of business owners. I own a number of businesses myself. I think it's extremely important to have well-trained, well-motivated business owners that can carry it forward and transfer their company, because the statistic is 80% of most business owners' net worth is in their business. And so if you're not training and sharpening the saw and developing your team, it's one of the largest assets you have in your life that you're neglecting, in my opinion. And so I think about the folks that are on the fence or have never considered Vistage, and I would urge you to, one, consider it. This is the to-dos, homework. Consider it. 2, call Catherine and set up a time. And then 3, go and be a guest at one of the Vistage meetings. And if you're not here, find your local chair. And if you're not sure, interview the local chairs around the area.
Right. Actually, if they call me or just send me an email, I can put them in touch with their local chair.
And so I've been to a number of the meetings myself, and so I think it's absolutely worth the time. It's a great resource, and the wisdom of the crowd and the wisdom of that network is invaluable. So if you're on the fence and trying to figure it out, just take my word for it and just go get busy and join up.
Yes. And it's Catherine with the C.
Catherine, Catherine,
right.
Wicklund.
Good job.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, Catherine, thank you so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure.
Yes,
Thanks,
ma'am.
Bob.
You bet.